Well, welcome back everybody to another exciting edition of Transformers Reviews. Well, today everybody, as you know by the title, we are taking a look at the top 10 best Legacy United figures. I almost said Evolution, but no, it's Legacy United figures. And I'm really kind of interested to see what you guys think of the list that we got here. So, without further ado, why don't we start with our honorable mention. And it is actually a tie between the Transformers Energon, Megatron, and Galvatron. Now, the reason these guys are honorable mentions is because this is my favorite version of the UT Megatron was whenever he was in his Energon form. And whether he was Galvatron or Megatron himself, the fact that these core class figures nail that aesthetic for basically the overall general idea of Megatron and Galvatron, that's why they land on the list. But one of the things that I dig aside from the colors is the fact that these guys have multiple assault mode configurations for their cannons. And maybe the hand cannon position's a little bit silly because that's not a thing for this Megatron, but hey, it gives these figures a little extra something. And there was a scene in Energon where Megatron actually rode atop of tidal wave, so if you do have that figure, you can actually slightly recreate it. And the fact that even though Megatron is a gunship, they are very jet-esque, so you can actually go ahead and make it look like one or both of them is taking off from the flight deck, which is really kind of cool. So regardless of these being core class figures, they're actually pretty fun to deal with. So that's why they land in the honorable mention spot. And moving on to our actual guy in the number 10 spot is Cyberverse Tarn. And despite the fact that it is supposed to be the Cyberverse version of Tarn, when you look at his face in comparison to this figure, it is clearly not him. Now the reason being is Hasbro didn't want to retool this guy. They figured it would just be easier to bang out this repaint, and I mean, they're not wrong. But he looks more like the Joker version of Tarn with that red line going across his face, and especially how he's got a little bit more pop of color in both his vehicle and in robot mode. And the fact that he comes with the samurai blade that Bludgeon previously had, we know it works well with this mold when it was him, but even as Tarn, it looks pretty sick. Now I do have to go ahead and put a disclaimer out there. The blade is actually this purple that you see there on the hilt. The reason it's silver is I did try to Sharpie it up, but because the plastic that this blade is, it didn't completely take to it. But when I really started looking at how the purple peeks through, it reminds me of that time that Prime Megatron got stabbed through the chest. And basically, as he slid off the blade, there was the little bits of his spilled Energon in purple. And even though it is by accident that my boy's sword does mimic that sort of detailing, it doesn't hurt the guy at all. For everything that we mentioned, the Joker-esque style in the face, the pops of color that the guy has, and the fact that he's rocking Bludgeon's sword now, that's why this guy lands at number 10. So our number 9 pick is that of Prime Cliffjumper. And yes, he did come out of the same 4-pack that Tarn came out of, but as we'll see, that was actually a pretty good box set. So there's at least one more dude out of there, which, if you know me, you probably can guess which one it is. I mean, it's probably not a surprise. But our boy here, I was actually able to see what he looked like compared to his original self in vehicle mode, and I gotta say that in isolation, the vehicle mode for this Legacy United version is okay, but when you put it up against the original, yeah, you can really start to tell where it kind of suffers in the fact that it doesn't look nearly as slick as the original. In the robot mode, though, it's a completely different story. You can see here that he looks a lot smoother than his original counterpart. And even in this shot, I like how these boys are charging into battle because Cliffjumper never had a Warhammer, but he looks sick with it. And the fact that our Legacy United version is reutilizing the claw feature from the chase mold that it's taken from, I don't think it looks bad that way either. However, whenever we switch over to the hand cannon mode, that is where this boy looks the best, and I am so excited to see Cliffjumper have that feature because, as you can see with the original boy, he's having to use his Warhammer as a battle rifle. So the fact that this modern day guy can take his accessories and reconfigure them to make at least one of the hand blasters, I kind of wish he could like do both of them. But the fact that at least he does have one, that is awesome. So I really like this version of the mold as Cliffjumper. I never had the Chase version. And as we discovered, this guy is excellent for photography. So that's why he lands where he does on the list. And our number 8 pick is none other than Titan class Tidal Wave. And oh my goodness, it has been a while since we've had a Titan on one of these lists, I'm pretty sure. But the fact this boy showed up in the summertime and I've been able to really enjoy him and see what he looks like with Megatron and soon to be Galvatron. I have always liked Tidal Wave, but seeing this guy in purple, not gonna lie, I am digging this. Now the only downside that I might say about Tidal Wave is the fact that I don't like that when you do give Megatron the upgrade kits, he kind of has like these mitten hands. And then I thought, you know who came with a weird pair of giant hands was actually Blitzwing. And you know, it's not as impressive as his actual hands, but I just thought I would go ahead and throw it out there as an option. There was so much about Tidal Wave that I wanted to go over, and I totally dig him, so I think that he has earned this spot on the list for sure. And number 7 on the list is our boy G1 Hound from the Autobots 5-pack. And let me tell you, I do find it funny because if you remember the list from last year, his pre-color of Detritus took the number 10 spot. But now that this guy has been released as who was always intended to be, you can see that it's bumped him up to where he is on the list. It was really kind of cool to see this guy compared to his Generation 1 version along with his Siege version, because I loved the Siege version of that guy, and man, to finally have the Earth mode version of him now is just so awesome. And what's really cool is if you happen to have both these guys and you want him to feel more like the Generation 1 figure, you could literally just take the rifle from your Siege version and give it to this dude, and I think he looks pretty sick with it as well. So by this mold finally just being what it needed to be from the very start, Hound has definitely earned his position here at the end of the year. And our number 6 on the list is none other than the G1 Toy Universe version of Optimus Prime. So the thing that I like about this version of Optimus is the fact that not only does he have the animation accurate rifle, but he also has the one that his original figure came with. Another thing is the fact that this Optimus Prime comes with an Energon axe, and he looks sick wielding it. However, there was a little bit of a bonus surprise in the fact that his truck mode, it's great, as you would always expect. It's what it's supposed to be. But the fact that the Earthrise trailer by accident can actually be used with this Optimus, and because he is smaller than the original, that puts him in scale with that Earthrise trailer, and so the boy can actually pull it and it doesn't look weird. Because when you think about the expression bang for your buck, it basically means that you're getting your money's worth. Well, I feel that I'm getting more than my money's worth out of this guy. I'm just happy that it comes in a boy that looks like my Generation 2 version. However, we are going to slot in an honorable mention, and is going to be our boy of the Starseeker Ferrac. And actually, I had him and Vector Prime actually kind of at the same level, and I had to decide which one would get the honorable mention. And at the end of the day, our boy Ferrac just, I couldn't help it. He is definitely worth it. Now, one of the things that I dig is the fact the hits of orange, how it kind of contrasts nicely with these darker grays and lighter grays. And I mean, it gives him a very X-Wing color scheme, and that's pretty sick. The level of a little bit of resculpting they did aesthetically on the chest, and how they redid the wings, allowing him to have his pirate pistols, that's really cool. And, you know, we did have him cameo in Scorponok's video. I find it funny that a guy that is a 2024 release looks good with a dude that came out 20 years earlier. And it was kind of fun figuring out their video segment of how they were like facing off with the Insecticons. And so he's definitely worth an honorable mention on this year's list for sure. And so we move on to our number 5 spot, and it is none other than the toy accurate version of Tarantulas. Now, if you guys recall earlier in the video, I said that we would see one other dude out of that 4-pack, that Tarn and Cliffjumper came in, and if you thought it was this guy, give yourself a round of applause because, come on, it's a orange Beast Wars figure. However, an interesting detail is if you look at the faces here, the original Transformers toys for Beast Wars actually had two different robot mode heads. On Tarantulas, you can see the one that this figure is imitating. That is what they considered the normal robot mode face. Whereas the mutant head, as we can see, served as the inspiration for what would become the normal standard Tarantulas look. And we do have to also throw the disclaimer out there that while it is the toy accurate version of Tarantulas, we're talking about the original prototype toy, not the actual one that came out, because in some of the earliest commercials, Tarantulas was actually this sort of orange instead of purple and black. And how it turned out, I'm not mad with it, because when you put him up with the premium finished version of Tarantulas and like the OG figure, it just looks pretty cool to see all the different iterations of the same dude. And so with Tarantulas now joining that group, I enjoy him all the more. And our number 4 pick is that of Cybertron Starscream. Now, in the haul review, we kind of talked about every reason why he's so awesome. So if you will allow me, I'd like to kind of reiterate some of those points. One of those things being that he is such a proper update to this version of Starscream. And the fact that he does have the tiny little cyber planet key that is just there for aesthetic purposes, that's really cool. I love the arm blades on this guy. I love the handgun on this dude. The fact that whenever you start giving him some of the accoutrement from his Generation 1 counterpart, like the crown, and also allow him to sort of rock that look like he's a conquering king. And then on top of that, if you can kind of see here in this picture, not only does he have the corpse of Metroplex and the battle armor of Optimus Prime forming like this kind of grand throne that he sits on, I'm just like, that is so cool that this Starscream can rock such an extra look. The fact that the boy has waist swivel also is really kind of cool. And then in jet mode, that look that he had in the show, the boy just sells it. The one thing that I dig about this figure is that he has 2 different areas you can store his weapon. If you want it to just be bold as brass, literally sitting over the top of the jet, you can have it just pointed out there. However, if you want the toy accurate approach, you can go ahead and have it attached to the bottom where it's a little bit more integrated with the vehicle mode. Yeah, I couldn't really put him any lower on the list, and even though it's not my necessarily most favorite version of Starscream, he's up there. And I'm excited to bring you our number 3, that being the Beast Wars version of Silverbolt. And I do kind of find it ironic that on the top 6 summer picks list, this boy came in at the number 3 spot, and ironically, he's still sitting there, which is a feat all of its own because very few people stay in the slot that they were in early in the year. But I gotta admit, Silverbolt is such a good figure. I mean, as you can see, he does have dynamic poses. He looks good with his fellow figures. This is such an excellent mold. This boy has some minor issues, but overall, what he does right more than compensates for those minor little flaws. So I guess if we're going to be honest, just like Tarantulas, it probably doesn't surprise you that he landed here either. And our number 2 guy on the list is none other than Magmatron. Now, if you guys did see the summer list that we had, you might be surprised because originally I listed Silverbolt higher than I did Magmatron. Well, I've had a little bit of time to come away from that video and reflect and readjust, and when I really thought about it is, yeah, Magmatron is awesome, and I feel he does deserve higher on this list. If it weren't for our number 1 dude, I might have put him at number 1, to be honest. And, you know, there may be a lot of YouTubers out there that will put this guy as number 1, and, I mean, it's not hard to see why. Look at everything Magmatron does. He has 3 individual beast modes, 1 combined mode, and then his robot mode. Look at the heft and the size of this dude. I mean, look at how much he dwarfs a modern deluxe like Tarantulas. That is awesome that this dude is just so big and massive. As you can see with this guy, he is rocking one of the blades that he actually stores on his winged head. He's actually enjoying the blaster, which I still think that is just so sick that they reinterpreted what was originally a missile launching feature to now basically just use blast effects instead. And then on top of that, the fact that this is also the hilt for his sword, that looks amazing. The fact that when you stick him with other original era Beast Wars figures, he looks like he was intended to go with those guys. His Legacy United aesthetic doesn't clash with those original Beast Wars figures, and he just looks amazing. And the fact that this Magmatron, yeah, it can be the Beast Wars Neo version, it can be the one from the comic book that I mentioned in this dude's video. He has been such a joy to have in the collection, because if you guys saw in the last video, I mentioned that I've kind of been missing this year the Beast Wars Megatron, because the prior 3 years he had a figure come out. So the fact that they kind of put Megatron on the bench and let him rest this year, I find that this Magmatron steps into that kind of void that I was feeling. And what also is very interesting is, like I said, he almost became #1, and he would have been continuing a tradition that since we started doing these lists as like a major feature on this channel, mainly the lists have been dominated in the #1 spot by baddies. Last year it was Desaurus, the year before that it was Dragon Megatron, the year before that was the Kingdom Megs. You know, so, I mean, the fact that Magmatron, he almost got there, but like whenever he went up against Unicron, he unfortunately was just not enough. And our #1 spot goes to no other than our boy Tigerhawk. And let me tell you something about my homeboy here, is this dude does everything that I wanted the original Tigerhawk to do, and maybe then a little bit beyond that even. And I tell you what, this dude, he was one of the first guys that we looked at this year, and he's kind of been percolating in my brain as I mean, every time a guy like Magmatron came up, I was like, okay, is he enough to knock Tigerhawk down a peg? And ultimately, at the end of the day, is one that I love taking off the shelf and just messing with him. The fact that even like this is something that I have not done the entire time I've had him. I was like, okay, I know he can hold the cannons, but what if we go ahead and plug them into his forearms? And I was like, okay, well, what about his wrist blaster? Well, you can see that I found a new place to plug it in. And I mean, dude, this right here, this with the wings spread out sideways like this, I mentioned it in this dude's review, is that the old boy had spring features. So the only two positions you could have Tigerhawk's wings where they were either straight up like this or they were locked in their downward position. But what I wanted that original Tigerhawk to do was have them like splayed out sideways. And I mean, it's just one of the, I'm excited, you can obviously tell. It's just one of so many features that this Maximal boy has. And I mean, like I said, I still enjoy messing with him. And it's been almost an entire year that I've had this guy. And so, I mean, really, all these other guys, yeah, I'll pull them off occasionally and look at them. But I don't enjoy them as much as I do Tigerhawk. And really, I mean, maybe it's my Beast Wars bias, but I mean, it is my list and it's very subjective. I would understand if you guys maybe didn't feel the same way, but for me, this is my #1 figure of the Legacy United line, and it was the first boy out of United that we ever looked at. It's kind of hard when it's a banger right out of the gate and it just hangs with you for the entire year. So yeah, I don't regret the decision, and he is just, yeah, he is definitely a really cool one. So that's why he lands at #1. And I'm kind of anxious. If you guys have the time, would you mind telling me what your top 10 figures of United were down in the comments below? I'd really kind of be interested to see. Or maybe even just your top 3 or 5, you know, whatever you want to put down there. So again, everyone, hope you enjoyed that review. And with really that being said, until next time, everybody, we'll see you guys in another review.